let's do some climate tech focused tech talks. Let's talk about what the corporate environment and big enterprises are doing. Let's talk about the ability for innovation to make it all the way into the larger companies instead of just talking about them as a startup initiative. We talk about small startups all the time. We talk about funding, we talk about the technologies they're using, but we don't glue the whole thing together all the way through to the users. And so we thought it would be a great idea to talk about this from the enterprise level on down, to bring in some of our corporate partners and say, what are some of the things that you're looking at? What are some of the big initiatives that you're driving? And what are some of the things that we can do at the base level, at the grassroots level with some of the small companies to have them create good solutions that will impact not only our tech ecosystem, but our business ecosystem and our climate ecosystem overall. So with that, I'd like to invite Opal Perry from PODS to come up and just have a little informal fireside chat. But again, thank you all for being here. I hope this is the first of many discussions like this where we get the community out to talk about some of these issues that are important and how those issues in the corporate environment intersect with the tech ecosystem. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to, oh good, you've got the camera, good. My duties are down to one. So first with a quick introduction. Opal Perry is an accomplished leader in shaping business strategy and revitalizing organizational assets to create new business models for growth. Prior to PODS, she served as Chief Information Officer and Executive Vice President for Hertz, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. Opal's career includes household names such as Allstate Insurance, Wells Fargo Bank, and she is a veteran of the United States Air Force. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So thank you, Opal, for coming and being our champion for this program, for the Accelerator program, but also for sharing your journey with our audience and talking a little bit about what does climate tech mean from the corporate perspective. You've worked for a lot of big household names. ESG is starting to become a buzzword on a lot of different levels, but what does it really mean for corporations like PODS? And so when Luke was over a couple months ago, we talked about 4 different pillars of innovation that PODS is embarking on. Can we just start out by talking about those 4 pillars and how you see that impacting business processes and the PODS overall business model going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very excited to be here with you all tonight. And PODS is certainly very thrilled to be a sponsor and active participant in this. And we are so excited about the community, the area, the Innovation Center. I think there's just so much talent and opportunity here. And as we look at PODS is a 24-year-old company that really every day we go out to serve customers who are going through some sort of major event in their lives that drives the need to move their belongings or store their belongings or do both. And so we look to provide a lot of flexibility and caring support to enable people with that. And PODS has been local to the area, but we have a national and Canadian footprint, over 200 locations. And I think as I've found working in different companies and across different industries, no matter what industry you're in and whether that's heavier on physical assets or a little bit lighter, the bigger a company gets, the more of a footprint, the more of an impact, also the more of the ability to influence both consumers, supplier partners, and others. And so when we look at our agenda for sustainability at PODS, and particularly around environmental impact, we've looked at that from those 4 pillars. And we think of those as our operational footprint, how we go out day to day to serve those customers. We also think about it in terms of our facilities and our direct assets and what's happening there in terms of energy emissions, our footprint, again, particularly as we look to grow and scale further. And then certainly there are our partners who help us transit some of our goods across the nation, across the border sometimes, and working with them so that when we're using their long-haul transportation services, how can we make that as low emitting and sustainable now, but also in the future. That gets really interesting with some of the potential innovation opportunities. And then finally, our 4th pillar, again, is really close to home. Everything we do is customer-centric. And when you just think about the sheer impact you have when you're moving your household, whatever size it is, right? There's a lot of opportunity, I think, to leverage innovation and sustainable goods and materials. It starts with our containers. The containers are amazing. Again, we're a containerized moving company, and we have containers that are 8-foot, 12-foot, and 16-foot long, and our typical customer will use more than one container to move their goods. And those containers have been a really remarkable, sustainable asset and footprint. We have containers that have been in service for several decades, almost the life of pods. And that's incredible because you're replacing what has been some less sustainable means. The moving industry traditionally used and still uses to a large degree plywood, smaller plywood containers that go within other forms of transport. And one of somebody I met in the relocation industry recently, he was saying to me, we were in a warehouse looking at those, and there's certain rules about they're not supposed to be reused and things, and he said the moving industry collectively takes down enough trees to fill 2 central parks to build these basically disposable assets, and you're recognizing the strength of here. To build a container, we have several generations, they've been improved upon over time, but to build this like core physical asset that can serve many different people, store things safely, keep it controlled, and reuse it over and over. I think that's one of the first pillars, but I mean, there's so many places to take it.
Well, that was one of the questions that I had. If you look at traditional containers, what is the expected life cycle of something like that? How long, how many years or months are they in service before they end up in landfill? Or are companies starting to look at those containers as a recyclable entity, or do they just get trashed over a certain period of time?
Yeah, we've really limit what has to go into the trash waste stream. So again, the containers are lasting a very long time. I think much more than what the team that innovated them back in 24 years ago.
What about the traditional containers that are made with wood and plywood? How long do they last compared to what PODS has done with their innovation?
I think physically they could last longer, but again, there are certain restrictions, particularly if they've crossed borders, so they have to get dismantled. And again, there may be some downstream. That's a good innovation area, right? Even on like how can you reuse some of those materials, but they're not able to be reused for their primary purpose.
So how has the transit industry overall looked at sustainability? Is PODS following some industry standards here? Has anything evolved in the transit industry, specifically in the moving and storage industry, that is driving this overall, or is that a little bit too much to hope for right now?
The standards are still emerging. We are really looking to be a leader, as we have been in a number of things we've done, and again, really encourage the ecosystem we participate on. You know, a lot of companies have a close eye on what is happening with transport, what's happening with electrification, what's happening with alternative fuels, but there aren't really great solutions, particularly I think for carrying the heavier payloads and the heavier freight. So still looking at how to develop that. A lot of again, we can operate well as a corporate entity to have a large footprint, but a central influence to change things. When you look at the traditional moving industry, you're looking at something that's highly fragmented, often with individual owner-operators, and I think that's where some of the innovation gets really intriguing, right? How do we make things economical and practical and able for people that are running their own, small family or small business to really adopt that and be part of the solution?
Yeah, scaling down to the individual operator seems like it would be a big challenge because they have limited assets, they have limited ability to bring resources to bear on something like that. You look at, and we had a company in the last cohort that was also focused on ESG, so you get wrapped up in all these different acronyms, and I was looking at ESG, and I tripped over another acronym today, which I thought I knew what it meant until I looked it up, but it was CSR. And to me, CSR means customer success rep. And in this world, it means social responsibility.
That's right.
And that's something that, again, ESG, they're pushing that upstream to the public companies and creating metrics for the bigger companies. How do you see ESG and CSR being implemented for smaller entities and making it viable for the smaller operator to look at social responsibility and think of it as not an economic disadvantage to their business?
That's right. I think it's very, very important that things are practical. And I know there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of people working within larger corporations to really keep the integrity of their programs so that it's not simply a financial play or a public relations play. And when you look at a business again of PODS mission and our operating footprint, what we do really has to be both good for the environment, good for the people, and good for the business, the financial outcomes on the long term. And I think, again, really just having a good loop of data is so important, really collecting and understanding what you're doing, not just assuming this is going to work, this is going to be the amazing solution. Being willing to experiment a bit, try different things, again, hear the voice of the end customer and understand, are we doing something that's ultimately enabling us to serve them profitably and drive good results is really key.
Well, the old adage of you manage what you can measure.
Yes.
Plays into this, and whether or not ESG is measuring the right things, I think, is up for debate. But looking at it's the granularity of your business, looking at all the different places where you have impact, we need to take things like ESG or CSR and make them approachable for big businesses and smaller businesses, because it just seems like I don't want to say greenwashing, but it seems there are a lot of organizations that are looking at that as a PR move, and obviously you're invested in making this actually impact business all the way through your value chain. And if you look at the history of climate issues, and I was looking back, I was trying to figure out when the DoD first named it as a strategic threat to global security. And I found documents going all the way back to the 90s saying, we have to address some of these things. We have to look at the resources. We have to look at that. So it's been around for a lot longer than just looking at the last 2 years and saying, well, ESG is a new PR move. How are companies that you work for in the past, like Allstate and Wells Fargo, but probably more Hertz because that's more transit related, how have they been looking at it? And how have some of those companies looked at these metrics and said, this is what we're going to measure the business, or in addition to the regular business metrics, these are the new things we're going to look at?
Yeah. Hertz and PODS both are great examples of operations that have a large footprint and many different operating endpoints, and particularly at Hertz, a very large fleet of individual vehicles rented to consumers. And so the more you can optimize the care of those assets, so it's amazing to me the power of software and how you can really transform things. So we spent a lot of effort on connecting our customers with the vehicles and connecting the vehicles and those data streams with our fleet management and operational control. So we were able to use telematics to connect the fleet, build the software that could analyze that and get, like an example would be, the more you can get predictive about when do you need an oil change and taking care of that oil change at the right time. It's good for the company because you're preventing a breakdown, customer dissatisfaction, you're preventing repair costs, but it's also great when you look at the outcomes for the environment, right? A well-maintained vehicle, and you think of what we each try to do personally with our footprint, but then you take a fleet of hundreds of thousands of vehicles and you realize really that power. Same thing at PODS in a little bit of a different angle, right? When I came in and Luke and I started working on sustainability, one of the first things we turned to were our warehouses, our storage centers where the containers and belongings are stored. And that's certainly a great footprint, and we started looking at alternative solar-based power opportunities like that, which we'll still pursue. But when we really did the greenhouse gas inventory, you realize the biggest thing we've got is the number of miles we drive. And the most addressable way to do that is to optimize the route planning so that we get super efficient with the mileage on the road. We've been conducting a pilot up in Ocala, and we're going to be rolling it out more largely soon, but it's shown to yield a 10% reduction in miles driven for the same routes. And when you translate those miles driven to gallons of diesel gas in our trucks, and you again multiply that as we're going to go out next year or early in the year to all of our locations, you start saying, wow, that's a really measurable impact. Again, we should do things everywhere we can, but once again, like using the data, performing the actual audit, not just assuming that, oh, solar power in the warehouse, powering those lights. that's the biggest bang. It's like really getting into it and realizing it.
Absolutely. Have you noticed that, or have you looked at individual metropolitan areas that have smarter transit, connected lights, things like that, leaned into the connected vehicle? Is that something you'll be looking at in the future? Or have you already looked at some cities that have made those investments to optimize traffic flows, to communicate back and forth to vehicles with the intent of saving gas, saving wear and tear on the vehicles, things like that?
Yeah, that's something I've been fascinated with across my career since I was in engineering school, really. And it's there's a couple different sides to that. So much is developed and more things are coming. One, to get to the smart city, you're deploying many different endpoint devices. And to see the innovations that have been made to allow those devices to become low power consuming and low maintenance on their own, right? Because if you're not careful about it, you have the potential to actually counter what you're trying
just moving the target somewhere to
achieve. I think other things I've seen that are very interesting. I lived in Belfast, Northern Ireland for a few years, and I saw pilot programs being run to passively use auto sensors to try to detect gas leaks, for example. And I don't think that actually went into production, but that's where I get really interested. And I've been a proponent of the lean startup method and participated in different accelerators and mentoring. But to see entrepreneurs that are thinking a bit, again, how do we take these devices that are being deployed and see the success of their initial method, but what else might we be able to do with that helps us accelerate the benefits that we're trying to achieve now and over the coming decades?
Well, you probably have seen a lot of startup ideas, some good, some bad, maybe mostly bad. What do you use as a rubric for looking at a new technology or looking at a startup idea and saying, this is when that would be mature enough for a large company, a Hertz or a PODS, to be able to even consider something like that? Because you operate on a massive scale, so would you actually do something in one city and just sandbox it for a while? Or would you look at something and say, it has to scale to a certain size before we could even consider working with a company that has that new innovation, whatever it is, whether it's connected vehicles or something else?
I think we certainly get a lot of learnings piloting something at subscale. We have to see the potential, not necessarily, it doesn't have to instantly be there, but is there the potential to really do this at scale? I think that's one of the biggest things I learned in my entrepreneurship classes. Again, there's a long path to customer discovery, product experimentation, validated learnings. There are a lot of twists and turns along the way, and in about every company I've been at Allstate, I helped lead, we did with Illinois at the time, what was called the Corporate Startup Challenge. And we brought in groups of startups. And our goal was, yes, we'd love to find some that we can directly do business with. But if we can't, we still want to invest in the learning, spend time offering, mentoring, as Luke's volunteered to do, really invest in the ecosystem and trust, like at some point it'll come back around. Also doing a lot to connect innovators with our suppliers. Once again, I think we can be a rich source of data. One of the hardest things to do, I think, as an entrepreneur in an area is how do you get access to data if you don't have the network? And companies like us with the right programs in place can help provide that data and that testing ground. Because to me, I think I've seen so many wonderful ideas. Like there are more good ideas than what I would call bad ideas. But the thing is, can this idea actually grow and test and become something that people want to invest in beyond the seed level and will actually turn a profit at the end of the day? And to do that, you really need to be able to do that customer discovery and experimentation.
Have you identified in any of your 4 pillars something that you would put out as a test case or as a sandbox for the entrepreneurial community?
We've been talking a lot about some different ideas, and I think by the time the program kicks off, we'll get a little bit more concrete. Again, we've got a number of different areas to look in, and we've been really sorting. I've been at PODS now since last September, and it's been a really great time starting to build the team. Luke came on board in January, and I think we're feeling good as we close out this year that we're starting to kind of get a hold of the business and understand what the levers are and be ready to engage in people that are thinking about how to serve things. What's again, really interesting to think about. We have this great core of the business that's been built, but where are we really going? Trying to offer people more help with their move and more ways to get done what they need to get done. There are a number of different pathways, I think, that we can connect on.
Yeah, because the financial industry has used the sandbox model quite a bit. Now, they have lots of regulations, so they build a sandbox which is, call it hyper-restrictive. You probably wouldn't have the same issues, but it would be great to see some experiment problems that could be put out to the entrepreneurial community globally, maybe, and just have people start picking at it. Because I think there's a lot of things that maybe even you don't see, a lot of blind spots that the entrepreneurial community and the tech ecosystem could ask a lot of questions around. We'd love to work with you on something like that, because
yes.
I think there's a lot of great ideas just under the surface. They may not all scale, they may not get the funding, but I think to get people starting to think about those ideas would be a great way to get a lot of technical people involved.
Yeah, it's certainly very healthy to have diverse perspectives come together.
Absolutely.
Like you said, sometimes you see something you may not have realized.
Well, it's one of the problems with the sandboxes in the financial industry. Is like everything's got to be really buttoned up, where I think we could probably be a lot more creative with something like this. What do you see, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but 3 years down the road, as kind of the playbook for individual operators and other people that are operating PODS franchises and other? Do you see them actually be a training program, or how would this roll out to the entire network once you have identified areas for improvement, for optimization, things like that? How would you roll something like that out to the individual operators?
Yeah, I am a big fan of, with the pilots, kind of first creating your early wins and your real evangelists, and then getting them to help carry that across the network of locations, right? We can carry a lot of credibility from a corporate function, but nothing's a substitute for someone who can stand up and say, hey, I've been operating this equipment for 12 years and this new software, hardware, whatever you gave me, like, oh, this really lets me get the job done better. So I think, again, starting in something, really proving it out, showing the results, bringing in the whole cross-functional team to see things, and then, again, starting to hopefully create a kind of magnet for people wanting to try things, and then also to put in place the measurements so that we can really know. And we've got to stay honest. Even it's not just like once you decide to do it, shut your eyes and like hope it has the right impact, right? There has to be a continuous review cycle.
Everything needs training wheels in the beginning, so yeah, they probably have to do it slowly. And like any other technical adoption, there's going to be your early adopters, there's going to be people that gravitate to it, that see the value, and people that are going to be the laggards. And you have to develop a program that accommodates both.
Yes.
And we see that all the time. And some enterprises love leaning into new technology, and some enterprises are going to wait till it's proven, or proven by a number of years and a number of other people to take the risk.
And there are often very good reasons for that. What people have had in their past experience, right? We've all heard we tried that before. So helping people understand, why are things different now? Maybe the technology is different. Maybe the time is different. Maybe the leadership is different in order to support things. And I think also got to get people to help share in the stake for success. So
again, it's not just about the technology. It's about doing that customer validation, doing that customer discovery up front, and understanding what people's motivations are. And we see that all the time of people not doing enough in-depth discovery to really understand what product market fit is going to mean for them, and just relying on, yes, this is a new technology and everyone should love it.
Yes.
It just doesn't work that way.
And too much of, when you got people say, oh, they just handed us this application or this device and they just told us, you have to do it. That thing that perpetuates, oh, someone made a decision, so now we have to act like it's going to be successful, versus, no, it really, really is something that facilitates success.
Absolutely. With kind of a wish list, what would you like the industry to provide to you, or what do you think is moving too slowly from a perspective of innovation that would be good for PODS or good for the transit industry overall, that you're just waiting for? Is it connected vehicles? Is it electric vehicles? Is it smart roads? Where are you waiting?
EVs are certainly very interesting. I think the EV options are growing, but a key part with the EVs is needing the larger infrastructure to support it, right? So you see, I think, a lot of the fruits of our labors at Hertz over the past year, and now you see there are more electric vehicles coming into the fleet, but it's also a race to say, do we have enough charging points, and can you work, like in that case, so many rental cars are at airports, can you work with the airport authorities? There's certain restrictions, again, on what you can do to that infrastructure because you're near a lot of fuel. So similar, we've been watching and seeing what's been happening with electric and autonomous large trucks and vehicles in different countries, in different locations, as they get safer and better to operate. But part of it needs to be able to bring in the affordable charging infrastructure and get the range and things like that, so you can say, well, we could still operate to go out with this truck and deliver to 10 customers in a day and have enough charge, or have places we can do the rapid charging, and there's a lot of calculus to it. So I'm a big fan of systems thinking, and it's not just the primary innovation of like an EV or an electric motor, but how does that come into everything else?
It's got to be all the ripples, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting because with Hertz and in the rental car industry, there's always been that customer penalty of fill it up before you bring it back. And with EVs, are you going to make customers go to an EV charging station to recharge their car before they return it to the airport? It doesn't seem like that same model works in that type of situation. I know you're not Hertz anymore, but it's just it's an interesting change of their model. I
went on a trip recently, and I had a reservation for an EV with another rental car company, and the process was such a hassle that at the end the guy said, well, can I just give you Alexis and we call it a day? And it was a quick trip, and I was like, oh, okay, but like my whole point was I was like trying to use it, but he had presented me with while he was trying to get me the car, he presented me with a 2-page piece of paper that I had to read, and it said, when you get the car, it'll have at least this charge, and you have to charge it, and when you return it, it has to have at least, I think there was a little bit of room, but it did make you think on a quick trip, like, wow, I can barely get time to stop and get the traditional gas on the way to the airport, and now
I've got to search for a charging station.
Do I need an account, and those were things we were thinking about solving when I was working in rental car, and there's a lot of smart people that keep working on solving it. But to go from the headline of so many EVs to the reality of, wow, that's a really great functioning experience is another matter.
Hotels have a obligatory number of charging stations, but certainly not any of the Marriotts or the Courtyard or something like that. You probably have 3 or 4 to choose from, and all those people, not all those people, but a lot of those people are renting cars, and they're all going to be fighting over those charging stations before they go back to the hotel. So
already, if you take a trip to Silicon Valley, I took a trip a year or so ago and was staying in Palo Alto at a hotel, and I came into the garage and oh, that's cool, they have the charging. It was full the whole time.
Yep.
You were there.
And probably didn't need to be, but people just parked there. Yeah.
Well, people will solve it. It's like anything else, right? It just takes time, and maybe it'll be solved in a different way. We're seeing a little bit again about battery swapping capability. I was reading about some of that in Asia last night, but about 10 years ago, I remember one of the companies was really working on that model of how you drive in and just get a new battery, and that didn't work out at the time, but different people are trying to solve different ways.
I saw the same thing recently, and it was for local delivery vehicles where they basically lift up the entire bottom of the van or the truck and put an entirely new battery pack in. And that to me just seemed like an absolute nightmare. I mean, it looked great in CAD, but I'm not so sure driving is going to work. So a lot of challenges to be solved. In the transit industry, there's a lot of different size vehicles. You operate mainly just one size vehicle?
We have a pretty uniform size vehicle that it does between your home and our storage centers, and back and forth. But then when we are going like across country with multiple customers, containers, we arrange for a long haul.
Are those your trucks or are those third-party drivers?
Those are third-party drivers. We have a variety of different arrangements, but you might sometimes, like if you're coming up and down 75, you'll look over and say, oh, now, once your awareness is up of pods in our containers, you start to see them more,
see
right?
them everywhere.
You see some of them sitting around sitting around the city, and then you'll see some of them on the trucks, but you'll see like 3 of the 16-foot containers get strapped down. And again, that's more efficient than doing a single transport. But now when we're coming out to your driveway, we have a truck. We have several different manufacturers that make the trucks. Like many people, we've been facing supply chain headwinds over the past few years. So we have some trucks we've kept in service a little bit longer than ideally we would like. We look forward as we're able to get new trucks and refreshed, a lot of those having lower emitting engines and better conditions.
Well, that was one of the areas that was being focused on, I think, with Tesla as well. They were looking at not only electric long-haul trucks, but autonomous long-haul trucks. Is that something that would fit into your model? I'm not sure if autonomous vehicles would work for local delivery. There's too many variables of driveways that need to be navigated and things like that. But for long haul, is that something that would be interesting for PODS to look into?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we look at what others are doing. We've taken a view of Sweden with Volvo. They've done a lot for many years of some of the convoying on their highways, and again, watching how do things develop from a safety perspective. And there's a lot of different aspects to that, but certainly as that matures and becomes something more addressable, we'd love to. That'll have an impact on us, as it will on so many different people.
It'll be interesting driving on the road with those. I'm not sure that I like seeing an autonomous vehicle that large in front of me.
Yeah, it's a little intimidating.
It's a little intimidating, yes.
Yeah. Again, all in good time, but yeah, do you want all of your life's belongings rolling down the highway too under robot control? Maybe not quite today. But.
Well, perhaps. So I don't have any other questions, but I would, if there's anything that you'd like to ask me or ask us, or more importantly, challenge the community with when it comes to their involvement in innovation and their involvement in reducing greenhouse gases in various businesses, I'd love to have your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're all in this together. I think we're all learning continually, right? Trying new things, learning from each other. That's why I'm so excited that there is a community and people come together to share ideas, and love to hear a little bit more about what you're thinking in the new year as you select your participants and kick off.
Well, and people have asked me, what's the cohort going to be like? And it's like, I don't know until we select the companies. So every cohort is going to be different based on the companies that show up. I try to get companies that are all at the same level because I want them to be a supportive peer group. I want people to go through the same problems and have the same wins at the same time. So check back with me, mid-December, end of December, early January when we start the program, and then we'll have a good idea of what the companies are going to look like and the problems are going to be challenging. That being said, anytime startups are going into a new program, the problem they end up working on is not always the problem they thought they were going to be working on. People pivot. People look at things different ways. People go back and do customer discovery, and they realize that their initial idea, it was close but no cigar. And so it's an evolution. It's a journey for all of them. It's a journey for me every single time as people go through this. And we look forward to having mentors and corporate partners to come along on that journey that will help those companies realize those aha moments, focus on the problems that need to be solved, and help them along the way. So I thank you for that. I'd like to open it up for just community questions and audience questions if there are any. Sarah, I know you'd have a question. Go ahead.
So I think it's interesting over the last couple of decades, there was a time where we told people you need to be green because you should, and it costs way more. Can you talk about margins, like with your containers that you can use for a couple of decades compared to ones that go in a landfill or they have short life cycles? Does this increase your margins, or where does it increase your margins? Is it just a good feel for what you do, or is it a good business case?
In terms of the sustainability, I think certainly the containers having a long asset lifespan is a great thing from many different sides, but looking at all avenues of the business, how do we break it down? What drives cost? What drives the cost we have to pass on to customers? I think like all of us, what's going to happen with fuel prices, different types of fuels, different places, what's happening with the costs needed to sustain healthy highways and infrastructure. We can be susceptible to changes from all that, so it's very something we definitely see we have a strong stake in, not certainly because it's good and we want to have the Earth be a great place for so many different generations and the beautiful waters out here off St. Pete and everywhere else, right? Be clean and be healthy, but also because it can help all of us find that path to do it in a way that sustains profitability.
Anyone else? Ian?
Yeah, I'm curious. I've always been interested in like the train and how trains be utilized for something like this, especially with pods. Just if it's come up in conversation, if you guys have used trains for cross-country transportation.
We have run some loads on trains, and the challenge that we found so far goes back to the route optimization. So the challenge of getting that kind of roughly last mile, if you want to call it, from the train station to where you need to go. If you're not careful, that effort can outweigh the benefit you get of the rail. But once again, that's something we'll see how things develop over time. It's certainly, there are some geographies where if you're going from a point to point, if the rail system's very developed, there's a little bit more opportunity there. But it hasn't really proven out for us to be like a mainstream option for shipping things every day.
I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. You spoke a little bit about endpoint and edge. Do you think about any innovations that are needed and new in privacy, security areas that would complement what you see coming out in the market today?
I think that is another really fascinating area, both just guarding the privacy of what people are doing with the use cases today, and then also when you think about how else might you be able to use containerized storage, a lot of it's like, could you use that for kind of a chain of custody of handing things off? But if so, how do you maintain the integrity of the information and make sure the appropriateness of what you're doing with the container, but yet allow people that sort of balance of handing things off and sharing it. Certainly the making sure today when you get a container, you lock it. We will not pick up a loaded container that is not locked because we want you on that endpoint to know that it's very secure and that you're the one that has the key. We've looked at various options for different types of Bluetooth or other connected locks to say, is there a good chain that you could share that? There are some devices like that, and people can use it individually today, but we'd love to try to find some of those solves. Like, I think as we see what happens with the next wave of sharing economy options, like, can we do something that lets you do that? But again, it's got to be practical enough. So.
Have you ever had customers put GPS trackers inside their pod?
We have. We also work ourselves on what's going to be a great trackable container that keeps signal and is reliable and operates. Again, learned a lot from the car industry in that about what's worth the price. We've been doing a pilot too that just uses our truck telematics systems so that we can message a customer and they can understand the ETA window in which we're going to arrive. And in some way, I love telematics. I mean, I love those sorts of things personally, but when you think of putting the device in, what people don't always understand is, if your container seems to backtrack a bit, you could get really upset, like, hey, are you not bringing it to my house? But there can be a very good reason. And so it's sort of when you overlay it more with our routing information of, yes, we're going to get to you by 1 p.m. and here's the
I'm the same way with Amazon when they say they're 9 stops away and they really aren't. So yeah, absolutely, yeah. So what would keep you from instrumenting every single pod? Is it battery? Is it signal? Is it what?
In my view, and we're always looking at different options, but from what I learned in rental car, it's just simply the operating cost. Once you really look at the scale you have of tens to hundreds of thousands of endpoint devices, and you've got to get something, and you've got to be able to get it manufactured, and the sensors are cheaper all the time, and batteries are longer, and there are different ways you can engineer it so it's not constantly running on the battery, but you're still talking about some number of dollars for the unit and then today you're often talking about some number of dollars a month, whether it's $1 to, let's say, $4 a month for a cellular signal. And you start, when we did the first connected car model at that scale of fleet, oh my God, that's a lot of operating costs. Is it worth it for what the consumer gets, or is it worth it for the care I get and the asset? So far I've been, from that lesson learned, backburnered a little bit the priority of trying to connect sensors into the containers, because we know when we're bringing you a container and I already have all that sitting on the truck for safety reasons. So if I can just join that up, it feels to me like it's a better way, rather than, the last thing I want to have to do is say, oh, here's your container, now I need to add, $15 a month to your rental fee because it's got all these great things. Like someone came to us and said, oh, I've done this and it's great. It's got humidity sensor in it, and it's like, that's really intriguing. I really respect that as an engineer and a technician, but we don't have a problem with humidity in the containers, because anytime your belongings are in it and it's in our custody, we put it in a climate-controlled warehouse. So it's not a problem worth paying money to solve. But again, all things in the future are open to
Just
it.
because you can do it doesn't mean you should.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Scott, you got a question?
Just more on the fun side. So from an innovation perspective, I just think there's some folks that I've met who have some very interesting sensors that they like to put in environments. They can sniff all kinds of different things. So humidity is one. There's like chemicals and other things. I'm just interested in what's kind of the most interesting innovation you've seen, not necessarily that was deployed, but just in your role, just some of the things that you've seen, because I think that could be interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, and at PODS it's early days still, so I think I'm still getting out to see things. But like in the car industry, a Israeli startup had it was like a strip, some kind of chemical strip, but it could neutralize the smell of cigarette smoke. And it was really interesting. Their demo was to set it there and then stub out a cigarette and then see if you could smell it. And it was such a simple thing, because it wasn't like a device that had to plug in somewhere that tried to emit and neutralize stuff. It was just something you could do, but you thought, wow, that's such a problem. I know I hate when I pick up a car and it reeks of cigarette smoke, but the ionizing treatment, you've got to go off-site, and the company pays $150 or so, and maybe it doesn't really work. And I don't know if they ever got that to the scale of production, but that was one really memorable one, because you're like, it's just such a little, it's just a little thing. Like at a unit level, it's not much, but you could see training the people that wash the car to just stick that in each time.
Wow. Love it. Anyone else? All right. Oh, Scott.
You got a question.
Go ahead.
Probably shouldn't ask what I want. Did you use pods when you did your move?
I did, yes. In fact, I still have my containers packed with my goods. I've recently bought a place in historic Kenwood here in St. Pete, and it's got a little bit of work that has to happen, and so there are two 16-foot containers with all my belongings that I locked up, stored together. But again, like these tools that I want, I put everything in the container, and then a few months later I decided, I want to swap some things around. And I was swapping couches, and I'm like, I looked at photos I took, and I'm like, the couch is in this container. So I have them bring back the container. They do a really nice job of it. I get out. I have some folks come out to help me. They pull the couch out. It's like, great. Wrap this couch up, put it in there, pull this couch out. Where are the couch cushions? It's like, oh no, I need to get the other container and have people unload everything, because the couch cushions, and you think, first of all, okay, well that wasn't, I started that morning, they packed everything, I'm so organized, it's going to be beautiful, and things are going to be grouped by room. And then by 2 o'clock, I was just this sweaty mess, just
Throw it in.
wherever. But then you're like, oh my God, so I'm looking forward to getting everything and getting moved in as soon as I get a little work done.
We've all been there. All right, Opal, thank you so much.
Hey, thank
Very
you.
insightful. So I hope everyone everybody enjoyed that discussion. We'd love ideas for future tech talks and more involvement from the business community. But we used to do these on a monthly basis. We want to get back to doing that. This has been a lovely facility. Thank you again to the Chamber and to Chris for hosting us tonight. But we don't have to get out of here right away, so feel free to network. There's some more snacks. Chat with people that are here, and I'd love to hear your ideas about what you heard tonight, any involvement in the upcoming accelerator, or just any way you want to be involved in the program going forward. And please, by all means, drive by the new building on 4th, take a look, and if you have any questions, mark your calendar, save the date for sometime in July, August of next year for the grand opening. We'd love to have you there. Thank you very much for coming out.